Last night, a statement caught attention. A close advisor to Donald Trump leaked information that the former president believes has evidence that points to the possible connection of Democratic leaders to the fires in Los Angeles. According to the statement, Trump sees these fireworks as more than a coincidence, suggesting they could be associated with a plan to impact his political legacy. With LA being a largely Democratic-aligned region, what questions do these allegations raise? And what could this possible evidence reveal about the causes of the fires? Stay with me in this video so you can hear what President Trump thinks of all this and what consequences this could have for the Democratic politicians who are supposedly behind all of this. But first, subscribe to the channel to receive more videos like this. I was in the cabinet, participating in the daily discussions when President Trump came in and shared his concern about the fires in Los Angeles. He commented, "These fires seem to go beyond natural tragedies. There may be something else going on here." His posture was serious, and he appeared to be assessing the situation with great care, considering the possibility that this was not just an ordinary environmental disaster. Trump explained that according to information that reached him, Trump mentioned that, in his opinion, certain groups may be associated with organized actions in the fires, although investigation remains necessary. He said these groups have a history of causing chaos and that setting fire to specific areas could be a calculated strategy to fuel the narrative of disorder, particularly around his inauguration. He said something that stuck with me. Trump highlighted his concern that fires in predominantly Democratic areas could be used politically against his administration, even though it is something they themselves are fomenting. He believes the fires were started in a deliberate and coordinated manner. According to him, there are reports of suspicious activities in forest areas before the first fires. He even mentioned that the use of drones may be involved, a technology that these groups could employ to spread fires quickly and accurately. This is not something that started by chance. This has possible patterns. In his view, the press is helping to cover up the true causes. He mentioned how mainstream media outlets are only focusing on the environmental and humanitarian impact, but completely ignoring the possibility of deliberate action. He was frustrated. They don't want to investigate because they are aligned with the narrative. They prefer to blame me. He concluded by making it clear that he will not ignore this situation. He said he has already ordered in-depth investigations, including the involvement of federal agencies. If these groups really are behind this, the American people need to know, and they need to pay for it. It was an intense conversation, and the president's level of conviction impressed me. He is willing to go to any lengths to expose what he believes to be an orchestrated attempt at sabotage. Still in the same conversation, President Trump raised another alarming question that, according to him, reinforces the idea that the fires in Los Angeles are more than they seem. He told me, "These fires didn't start by chance. I have received credible information that the left may be using drones to spread these flames, strategically and intentionally." The tone of his voice was indignant, but also determined. He explained that drones could be used to trigger fires in very specific areas, making the work of firefighting teams more difficult. According to him, the technology available today would allow this equipment to carry incendiary devices and operate in remote and difficult-to-access locations, far from the immediate reach of authorities. Trump highlighted that the hardest-hit areas appear to have been deliberately chosen. Strategic regions to attract media attention, cause significant economic damage, and even generate social instability. He mentioned that the timing of the fires was also no coincidence. "We are talking about a period in which my administration is focused on critical national issues. This is a clear attempt to divert us from our path." The president also pointed out how the use of drones reinforces the idea of an organized action and not a simple natural accident. He commented on internal reports indicating drone sightings in forested areas before fires were detected. He said something that stuck with me. "It's obvious that this is a planned attack. These people are willing to destroy the country to gain political control." Trump also talked about how the left was using these tactics to paint a scenario of natural disaster exacerbated by the federal government's failures in dealing with climate issues. He believes this is part of a larger strategy to discredit his policies and push a radical environmentalist agenda. Finally, he reiterated that these allegations are being investigated and that, if confirmed, it will be irrefutable evidence that the fires were deliberately used as a political weapon. Trump has emphasized his view that the public deserves greater transparency about the causes and impacts of the fires. This was one of the most tense parts of the conversation, as the president seemed convinced that modern technology is being used in harmful ways against his administration and the country. At another point in the conversation, President Trump raised an even more controversial point. He believes that the fires in Los Angeles are part of a larger plan by the left to weaken Republican states economically and harm the stability of the country. He said firmly, "They know that if they hit economically strategic areas, especially those that support our government, they can have a devastating impact." Trump explained that many of the country's vital natural and economic resources are located in regions that are now at risk of being affected by these fires. He specifically mentioned that the damage is not limited to the destruction of forests, but also affects supply chains, local industries, and even rural properties owned by people who support his administration. "You see," he continued, "the Democrats know exactly what they are doing. These fires are not just about creating panic. They want to destroy the economic base of conservative states and redirect resources to states they run." He mentioned how certain Democratic states are already offering themselves as leaders in disaster control, while Republicans deal with the destruction. The president also highlighted that the fires have a psychological and political impact. He said many affected communities, which traditionally vote Republican, can be manipulated by the narrative that the federal government is not helping enough. "They want to turn these people against us," he said. Additionally, Trump pointed to the massive spending needed to fight the fires and rebuild affected areas. He believes that the left is using this strategy to burden the federal government with unexpected costs, harming its administration by putting economic management under additional pressure. "It's an economic war in disguise," he emphasized. "They're not just burning trees, they are trying to burn our future. But that won't work. We are tracking their every move, and the truth will come out." Trump's determination to unravel these connections was palpable. He seemed determined to expose any link between the fires and a possible left-wing agenda to sabotage his administration. In a more heated moment of the conversation, President Trump brought up Hollywood's possible involvement in the fires in Los Angeles. He stated with conviction, "Don't underestimate the influence of Hollywood. They not only control the narrative in the media, but they may be directly involved in creating the chaos we are seeing now." Trump explained that Hollywood, with its strong left-leaning, has the financial resources and network necessary to support groups that could be behind the fires. He mentioned that many prominent actors, directors, and producers have been using their platforms to attack his administration and, according to him, could be financing actions aimed at destabilizing his leadership. "It's no coincidence that this is happening in LA," he continued. "They know that this city is a symbol of liberalism, and anything that happens here echoes throughout the country. They want this to look like an environmental disaster caused by the federal government's incompetence." Trump also highlighted the role of the Hollywood media in amplifying the narrative of the fires. He stated that instead of investigating the true causes, mainstream media outlets are using dramatic images and emotional stories to reinforce the idea that his administration is not dealing with the situation. They are turning this into a spectacle, he said, and who better to produce a spectacle than Hollywood? In addition, Trump raised suspicions about donations made by big names in the entertainment industry to organizations that could be linked to the fires or the spread of misinformation about the real causes of the problem. They want to pose as heroes, but they are fueling the problem behind the scenes, he said. Finally, the president reinforced that Hollywood's involvement, if confirmed, would be a clear example of how the left is willing to use its cultural and financial influence to achieve political objectives. They spare no effort, but we are watching, and we will expose every connection, every link. Trump's frustration was evident, but so was his determination not to let the Hollywood narrative prevail over what he believes to be the truth. President Trump delivered a scathing indictment of Democratic governors, especially those running states heavily impacted by the fires. He stated, "These governors are deliberately sabotaging federal efforts to control the fires. They don't want us to resolve the situation because it doesn't advance their narrative." Trump explained that, in his view, Democratic governors are being negligent on purpose, especially in maintaining forests and managing wildfire risk. He said, "They've had years to clean up these areas, but they haven't done anything. And now, when disaster strikes, they point the finger at Washington." He also mentioned that there have been cases where state officials have rejected or delayed implementing federal aid to deal with fires. "They want to make it look like we are to blame for the lack of action," he said. "But we know the truth. They are playing dirty." Trump was particularly outraged that these governors have used the fires as an opportunity to promote environmental policies that he considers radical. He claimed that the same people criticizing the federal government for its response to the fires are those blocking practical efforts, such as building fire breaks and clearing vulnerable land. "They are using this as an excuse to strengthen their climate agenda," he said. "They say these fires are the fault of climate change, but we all know that's just a smokescreen, literally." The president also raised suspicions about the funding received by some of these states, suggesting that governors may be exploiting the situation to secure more federal funds, which would be redirected to political projects and not to solving real problems. Finally, Trump made it clear that he is not just frustrated, but determined to expose what he called the dirty political game of Democratic governors. "They are sacrificing people's safety to score political points, and that's not just irresponsible, it's criminal," he concluded. Elsewhere in the conversation, President Trump harshly criticized the media, claiming that the fires in Los Angeles are being used as part of a coordinated campaign to exaggerate the damage and criticize his administration. He said, "The big media outlets are not interested in the truth. They are aligned with the left and want to paint a catastrophic picture that puts all the blame on me." Trump highlighted that, in his view, the media is intentionally ignoring evidence that could point to deliberate causes of the fires, preferring to focus on emotional narratives that directly blame the federal government. He mentioned, "Have you seen any reports investigating how these fires started? No, they only talk about destruction and federal incompetence because that's what sells." The president also pointed out how anchors and commentators from major networks are using the disaster to reinforce the idea that his administration has neglected environmental issues. He said firmly, "They are trying to turn this into a climate change crisis when there are much more sinister motives behind it that they don't want to expose." He also accused the media of being selective in their reporting, singling out only Democratic states as leaders in responding to the fires, while ignoring federal and Republican states' efforts. "They are promoting fake heroes while demonizing the government that is actually trying to solve the problem," Trump said. Another issue raised was the international impact of this coverage. Trump commented that the way the fires are being reported hurts the image of the United States abroad. He said, "They are trying to make the world believe that this country is falling apart under my leadership, and that is simply a lie. The media is complicit in this attack on our nation." Finally, the president declared that he intends to unmask this media campaign, investigating in depth the connections between major media outlets and the groups he believes were behind the fires. "The truth will come out. They can try to silence us, but they won't succeed." Trump's frustration with the role of the media was evident, and he seemed determined to expose what he considers to be a political alliance between the big media and the left. In one of the most emphatic moments of the conversation, President Trump addressed the issue of climate change, classifying it as a manufactured excuse by the left to justify the fires in Los Angeles and promote a radical agenda. He said, "They are using these fires as a weapon to push extreme green policies and tax the population even more." Trump argued that the narrative that the fires are a result of climate change is an attempt to divert focus from other possible causes, including environmental mismanagement in Democratic-run states. "They have had decades to deal with clearing the forests with proper soil management, but they prefer to blame the climate and attack my administration," he said. He also highlighted how left-wing leaders are using the fires to justify ambitious proposals like the Green New Deal, which he called an economic disaster disguised as environmental policy. For Trump, linking the fires to a global climate crisis is part of the story, of a larger strategy to impose tighter government controls and weaken the economic independence of the United States. "They are manipulating science and public opinion to blame my government for something that is completely preventable," he continued. Trump also mentioned that measures suggested by the left, such as the transition to clean energy and restrictions on the fossil fuel industry, could seriously harm jobs and the economy. The president went further, claiming that these tactics are used to create a sense of urgency and panic, which allows the left to advance their policies without significant opposition. "They want the American people to believe the sky is falling, but the real crisis is their incompetence and their obsession with turning this into a political advantage," he said. Finally, Trump reiterated that the fires are not proof of climate change, but rather of mismanagement and possibly deliberate sabotage. "This has nothing to do with the weather. It has to do with a political agenda that is trying to destroy everything we fight for." The firmness in his voice showed that he is determined to combat this narrative and expose what he believes to be manipulation of the crisis for political gain. At the end of the conversation, President Trump made an accusation that, according to him, connects the fires directly to the left's electoral strategy. He stated, "These fires are not just about chaos and destruction. Trump has expressed concerns that conditions created by the fires could influence changes to the electoral system." Trump explained that the devastation in Los Angeles and other affected areas will be used as an argument to implement mass mail-in voting, something he has repeatedly criticized as being vulnerable to manipulation. He said, "They are destroying infrastructure and claiming that people are unable to vote in person. This is exactly what they want to cheat the system." He mentioned that the fires could be used as an excuse to claim a lack of security in affected regions, forcing voters to rely on alternative voting methods. Trump stated, "The more they can decentralize and digitize the process, the easier it will be for them to manipulate the results. It's a perfectly orchestrated plan." The president also raised suspicions that certain left-wing politicians could be using the fires as a pretext to implement electoral changes that would be almost impossible to reverse after their initial application. He said, "They will claim this is a temporary necessity, but once they put the system in place, it will be impossible for us to restore the integrity of the elections." Furthermore, Trump highlighted how the fire narrative is being used to mobilize public opinion against him, reinforcing the idea that his administration is neglecting the situation. He believes this could negatively impact the support of his voters in strategic areas. "They are trying to weaken my base by making it look like I'm not looking out for these people. It's a cruel and calculated maneuver." Finally, Trump declared that he is aware of these movements and that his government will take measures to guarantee the security and transparency of the next elections. "They can try, but we won't let them. The American people deserve a fair system without these cowardly manipulations." The determination in his voice was clear, and he left the conversation with a direct message. "We will expose this and ensure the truth prevails."